Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Shri Radha Bihari Lord Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Shri Gaurakai Shri Shri Damodar Lord Shingadev Ki Jai.
first verse has
Sorry?
this verse here is a very short purport.
Yeah.
You might want to get a few others after that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Two others.
Well, thank you. Yeah, let's see how it goes. Because what happened, I studied a little bit and Prabhupada quotes the Gita verse. Because of the short purport, I thought we could read a bit of that purport.
Sure.
But if I run out, we'll do some more verses. I was noticing that too. What's the time? I want to go over. What time?
8:30.
So including discussion, stop at 8:30 sharp. Okay, just making sure I know. Thank you. I'm already an offender on the time.
And I miss your idea they went for 1,000 years.
They weren't maintaining such a big temple.
Big Srimad-bhagavatam Class. Course in Irish for 1,000 years.
Actually, it's funny, when I was a brahmachari, Radhanath Swami would occasionally come to San Diego where I was stationed. And just on this point of things going a little longer, And I never saw anybody else do it before or since, but when he would come, he would visit Gunagraj Maharaj, who was living there. They were old friends. And he would lead Mangal Arti. And he would go, curtains would close, he'd go for about another hour. We just dance up and down. In those days, tons of brahmacharis, everybody was under 25, We just dance up and down the temple room for an extra hour, It was quite ecstatic. I was appreciating the taste that he had for the holy name. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So we are on text 27, chapter 20, canto 9, the Dynasty of Puru, and we're right now on the son of King Dushmanta, King Bharata. And I've sometimes heard that, I used to always think Bharata Varsha was after Lord Rishabhadev's son Bharata, but I've also heard sometimes that or maybe it's both, that it's named after this King Bharata. Anyway, they're both great exalted souls. Excuse me one second. Trayas Trimsach Chitam Yashvan. Trayas Trimsach Chitam Yasvan. Vadva Vishma Payan Ripan. Vadva Vishma Payan Ripan. Dosh Mantir Atyagan Mayam. Dosh Mantir Atyagan Mayam. Devanam Gurum Ayayo. Devanam Gurum Ayayo. Trayas Trimsach Chitam Yasvan. Vadva Vishma Payan Ripan. Dosh Mantir Atyagan Mayam. Devanam Gurum Ayayo. Trayas Trimsach Chitam Yasvan. Vadva Vishma Payan Ripan. Doshmantiratyagan mayam Devanam Gurum Ayayo Ayastim Satchitam Yasvam Vadva Vishma Payam Ritam Doshmantiratyagan mayam Devanam Gurum Ayayo Ayastrim Satchitam Yasvam Vadva Vishma Payam Ritam Doshmantiratyagan mayam Devanam Gurum Ayayo Devanam Gurum Ayayo Ayastrim Satchitam Yasvam Word meanings. Trayaha, 3. Trimshat, 30. Shatam, 100. He, indeed. Ashvan, horses. Badva, are resting in the Jagya. Vishma Payan, astonishing. Nripan, all other kings. Dushmanti, the son of Maharaj Dushmanta. Atyagat, surpassed. Mayam, material opulences. Devanam, of the demigods. Gurum, the supreme spiritual master. Ayayo, achieved. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Bharat, the son of Maharaj Dushmanta, is this volume okay? Is that right? Too loud, too soft? Bharat, the son of Maharaj Dushmanta, bound 3,300 horses for those sacrifices, and thus he astonished all other kings. He surpassed even the opulence of the demigods, for he achieved the supreme spiritual master, Hari. You do the please repeat. Bharat, the son of Maharaj Dushmanta, bound 3,300 horses for those sacrifices. And thus he astonished all other kings. He surpassed even the opulence of the demigods. For he achieved the supreme spiritual master, Hari. Srila Prabhupada's purport. One who achieves the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead certainly surpasses all material wealth, even that of the demigods in the heavenly planets. Yam labva chaparam labham manyate nadikam tata. The achievement of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most exalted achievement in life. Om Ajnanatamarampasya Jananjanam Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So, as Dharma Guru was pointing out yesterday, this fact that King Bharata, by his jagyas, surpassed even the opulences of the demigods, right? And as Dharma was pointing out, sometimes the demigods get a little thrown off by this. They get a little worried, right? They're also devotees, but they're known as sakama devotees who still have some desires. So they're very wonderfully placed servants of the Lord, doing very, very responsible work in the universal management, right? They're like the cabinet ministers of the universal government, and they have their portfolios, and they have their duties, and like everything in Vedic culture, there are duties, there are responsibilities, and there are facilities, right? This is how it works. To do your service, you have to have some facility, right? So everything was very proper in those ancient times, right? So the demigods, they have these very important duties, and they have incredible facilities. Long, long life, incredibly strong sensual power, mental power, mystic powers, you name it, they got it, right? Long life. And so, although they're servants of the Lord, and although in their hearts they're devotees of the Lord, the possession of such great opulences sometimes can become confusing for them. It can sometimes become even a stumbling block, right, in their own devotional life, right? So, as Dharma pointed out, when we learn that King Bharata performed, 78 jagyas along the banks of the Ganges, from the Himalayas down to the, what is that, Gangasagara, where it meets the Bay of Bengal, and then he performed another 55, I think. Another whole bunch. So like another 55 along the banks of the Jamuna, right? And as Dharma pointed out, this, pastime with King Prithu. King Prithu got to 99, and Indra was like really disturbed because he's famous as the guy who did 100, So he wanted to see, as he sometimes does, when he sees someone making progress through great austerity, he becomes concerned because he attained his position by great austerity, right? The demigods, they're very responsible souls, and they understand everything comes from austerity. They attain their positions by austerity, right? We understand that to achieve the post of Lord Brahma, a living soul has to perform their duties in Varnashram perfectly for, is it 100 verse? Something like that. Somebody who performs everything to the letter for like 100 verse, gets on the level where they could become a Brahma. So, there's very, very high standards of austerity that they've performed to get these positions. So when Indra, saw King Prithu getting close, he became very disturbed. Now, Maharaj Bharata apparently was able to surpass that. And I was wondering yesterday when you were giving class, was it because he staggered it out? Like King Prithu was doing them all in one place, kind of like boom, 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 right? Big assembly. And Maharaj Bharata, this was a series up and down the banks of the river, so maybe Indra wasn't noticing that, he was getting there. There was some time lag in between there. I'm not sure. I'm just speculating. We shouldn't speculate, but it is an interesting, situation. But the point that Srila Prabhupada is making is that although he surpassed even the demigods in their opulences, his only wealth that he valued was the shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? And herein really lies the super excellence of pure devotional service, right? Pure devotional service is so wonderful that although the devotee may, by the grace of the Lord, attain all opulences, those opulences mean nothing to him personally, right? For outside of the Vaishnavas, generally speaking, the path of spiritual progress is vairagya. One has to be detached. One has to perform austerity, right? This is very, very important. One has to cultivate spiritual knowledge, perform austerity, and this is the only way forward. But in Bhakti Yoga, especially in this mission of Lord Chaitanya, as Srila Rupa Goswami has explained, we have a higher form of vairagya called Yukta Vairagya. And Yukta Vairagya is so beautiful because it recognizes that everything that one would normally have to completely avoid in spiritual life, rather one recognizes that everything is connected with Krishna. Everything belongs to Krishna. Everything is within Krishna. Whenever we read the prayers of the great devotees throughout the Bhagavatam, we're reading all these prayers, and generally they begin by pointing out that you are the source of everything. You are the reservoir of everything. Everything is coming from you. All knowledge is coming from you. Like they point out all of these important characteristics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the Vaishnavas, recognizing that everything belongs to Krishna and everything is Krishna's energy, the only sense in which it's illusory is that it's temporarily manifested and that we fall into illusion thinking it's ours, thinking that it has some value separate from its relationship with Krishna. So the Vaishnavas, by the grace of Lord Chaitanya and his followers, they have this very, very big field of Yukta Vairagya where everything and anything can and should be engaged in the service of the Lord. And this was really developed by our acharyas, although they personally exhibit the supreme topmost levels of humility and austerity, but they do it through this process of Yukta Vairagya, right? There's the famous story, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta showed up somewhere in a car, right? And maybe there was some little mumbling, because sometimes the sadhus had some idea that devotee would not ride in a mechanized conveyance. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta instructed his disciples, actually only the devotees should drive in cars, right? Everything should be used. One time when Prabhupada came to the West, somebody gave one of those stump the Swami questions and they said, we see that you arrived here on an airplane, how is that, spiritual, And I think Prabhupada explained, well, there's different ways to fly. You can chant a mantra and these pigeons will come and they'll, fly you like that. There's different ways, but he said, I flew on a plane just to become one with you, like that, right? So Srila Prabhupada, he exhibited this principle of Yukta Vairagya so beautifully, so wonderfully, right? He arrived in, where was it? I don't know if it was Philadelphia or Dallas, but he arrived somewhere. And again, by that point, people were looking to find some fault, and they said, I noticed that your disciples picked you up in a very opulent car, right? In other words, how is that spiritual, And Srila Prabhupada immediately explained that the spiritual master is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, like an ambassador. And if the ambassador of another country comes to your country, how is he treated? He is treated with all the respect that is due to the political head of that other country, to the king or to the president, right? To the queen, like that. So Prabhupada said, similarly, the spiritual master is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when he comes to your city, if God came to your city, you would have to bring a golden chariot, right? But similarly, his representative should be received like that. But this is the best they could do, so I accepted it, right? Prabhupada didn't back down one iota because he was always teaching. He was teaching that this is the proper way to respect the spiritual master because they are the representative of the Supreme Lord, right? Very, very important point. My son-in-law, his name's Deva Madhava, he's a very nice devotee. And one time he was visiting San Diego and he gave Bhagavatam class. And I always remember this because I'd never thought of it before. But he made a very nice point. He said that although Srila Prabhupada is the most humble devotee, right? To help all of us make progress, he actually had to teach his disciples how to worship himself because there was no other spiritual master. And there was no history of Vaishnava culture. There was no history of spiritual masters. Nobody knew anything. Prabhupada, to enable us, because without worshiping the spiritual master, we cannot go forward one iota. Not happening. We can't. So Prabhupada, for our benefit, in spite of his humility, he had to teach us how to worship him, right? So this is Yukta Vairagya. It's using everything in the service of the Lord, which Srila Prabhupada did so wonderfully, right? So this is a very important point, because situations in this world are constantly changing, right? Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, physical nature is endlessly mutable, like that, right? It's constantly changing. Material energy is always there. It's one of the Lord's eternal energies, right? But it's constantly transforming, like that, constantly transforming. So the situations that are occurring in society at one time, the material situations, at another time they may be changed. But the principle of engaging everyone and using everything in Krishna's service for the Vaishnavas, that never changes, right? Therefore the Vaishnava has to be alert how to find the ways and means to engage people in Krishna consciousness, right? And that may gradually morph over time. Again, the details differ, but the principles are always the same. So we see in Prabhupada's mission on behalf of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, the Parampara, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Panchatattva, he came all over the world to propagate Krishna consciousness. And he offered it to everybody and anybody. But at that time, there was a certain class of people who were the most ripe, the young people, the hippies, right? So Prabhupada, many of his, not all, but many of his followers were coming from that background, right? And it was spreading like that, and very, very nicely, right? And it's not that Prabhupada had any history of relating with hippies. In fact, one time he was speaking, and he mentioned hippie, and the reporter said, "What is a hippie?" And Prabhupada laughed and said, "You know better than me." And then Prabhupada said, "Something extraordinary." So that was going on at that time, and that was very wonderful. And a lot of our preaching was geared in ways that were very conducive, right, for those kind of people. I've always had great appreciation for the service of the devotees here in Miami. When I was a young man, I grew up in New Jersey, and when you turn 17, you can get a license in a car. So I turned 17 and I got a license in a car, and myself and two friends, we had all started going to the temples about 3 years before that. We decided to go to Key West. So we're driving to Key West, and we were passing through Miami on a Sunday, and we contacted the temple to find out where it was. There was no internet in those days. Jai Shri Shri Radha Braja Bihari, Shri Prabhupada. So anyhow, we got a hold of the temple, and we asked where it was so we could come to the Sunday feast. And they said, actually, this is 1974. Actually, we're celebrating the Sunday feast in Peacock Park. So we found out where Peacock Park was, and we parked our car, and we're walking across the grass. And as we came into the park, we noticed some of the coconut trees had little clumps of incense burning. It was a very nice atmosphere. And over on one side, there was a little palanquin altar with beautiful Sri Sri Radha Damodar, because Radha Damodar party was visiting apparently. And at that time, I'd never had their darshan before. And I saw this man in orange, and he was sitting there. It was a hot Sunday, and he was chanting to Radha Damodar like there was no yesterday and no tomorrow. And that was Vishnu Jan Maharaj, first time I ever saw him. And he was chanting. At that time, I'd been going to the temple for 3 years, and I'd never seen anybody chant with that kind of abandon. I mean, he was just immersed. And Vishnu Jana. Yeah, they had a Radha Damodar bus, and in the winters, they would spend time in these southern states because those buses were not that well insulated or heated, you know. So anyway, they were here in Miami, and it was this time of year. As I recall, it was like February, March maybe, but it was this time of year. So anyway, it was a wonderful Sunday feast, and I was so blown away And that was the perfect setting for preaching to the hippies, because it was like love and peace and this beautiful kirtan in the park, and there was wonderful prasadam, and devotees were very, everybody was young, and there was a lot of outreach really strong. So they invited us. They said, well, 2 days from now, it's Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's appearance, I believe it was. And we're going to have another festival just like this, only bigger. So why don't you stay? So we stayed at the temple for 2 days. It was also in Coconut Grove, but it was that one with the banyan trees and a bit more land. And so we stayed for 2 days, the three of us. And it was really wonderful. And then 2 days later, we went back out to Peacock Park. We had a whole other festival with Radha Damodar. And it was very, very sweet. And the devotees were so kind. And then after that, we were about to continue on our way to Key West, beautiful time. It was myself and my friend and his girlfriend. We grew up together. And they even had her wearing a sari and we were wearing tilak. We weren't, we were guests, But anyway, it was funny because the day we were leaving, we had breakfast under the banyan trees. And then Abhiram Prabhu, TP at the time, half joking and kind of half serious. There was a bunch of brahmacharis around, and he said, "You see these boys?" And we're like, "Yeah." He said, "If I tell them to, they won't let you leave." This was 1974. This is how devotees preached, And he was joking, but there were a few brahmacharis standing around, and we were like skinny hippies, But he was joking. So anyway, he said, "You see these young men? If I tell them to, they won't let you leave." So he was half joking, They were, making devotees left and right. And so anyway, we thanked him and we continued on our way. But that was the first time I ever was here at the temple. But, that preaching was perfect then, because it was like the generation of love and peace and flowers and, like a Sunday feast in the park. And it was very, very wonderful and beautiful. I don't know if you always did that then, or if that was because the Maharajas were here. Or pretty regular for a while. Yes, it was a very, very blissful experience. I mean, it really enlivened us like anything. So, but again, over time things change. So like nowadays, we were laughing last night because I was mentioning to Vishal, because Mahatma's his spiritual master. And my wife and I served in Hawaii the last 3 years, and Mahatma had invited us to the next island, Maui. He was visiting some disciples there, so we went over. And there's a temple there called the Temple of Peace. And an old Prabhupada disciple opened it like 20 years ago. And it's a very unique thing. I mean, it's super ecumenical. He's got, Mother Mary, Jesus, Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta, Sridhar Maharaj, Narayan Maharaj. He's got like everybody on the altar, And it's the last resort of hippies. I mean, I thought the hippies were done, but they're all on Maui, and the place was full. I mean, there was like 100 hippies, and they're all yogis and yoginis. So the kirtan was like, Mahatma got this rockin' kirtan going, and they're dancing, but because they all do asanas all day, I mean, they're dancing like pretzel man and pretzel lady, they can just do all these moves. It's like, wow, it's quite exciting. And then the final kirtan, because we went to this yoga center last night, and they began their kirtan with Radhe, 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 Govinda, Radhe. So the very last, it's what reminded me of it, the very last kirtan at this Temple of Peace, the guy who runs it, oh God, and I keep forgetting his name. Anyway, he's a Prabhupada disciple from New Zealand, but he opened it 20 years ago. He lives there. He after Mahatma's kirtan and a couple other kirtans, Krishna Kanti Prabhu also led a kirtan. He was the recording engineer at Golden Avatar Studios. He lives on Maui. He's the guy you see holding the mic up to Prabhupada when they're recording him in LA. Anyway, he's a recording engineer, but he's elderly, but he lives there. He led a kirtan, Mahatma led a kirtan. And then this devotee that runs the center, he charges out into the middle of the temple room with the guitar, and he goes, "Now we're going to do one for the goddess." And he launches into Radhe, Radhe, Radhe. And all the hippies just went like wild, and they were doing that thing where you like build the bridge with the hands and everybody dances through back and forth, and like the devotees keep going in unison, like creating like this arch, and all the other devotees are going under, and you get to the other end and you become the arch, and it's like this moving circle, It's really far out. Anyway, he leads us in like half-hour Radhe, Radhe, Radhe kirtan, which reminded me of last night. But anyway, that was a blast, but you don't find that concentration of hippies everywhere, but by Krishna's transcendental arrangement, right? Now you have this very vibrant yoga scene, right? And yoga is so popular, and it appears, my observation last night, we went to this yoga center that Chandra Prabhu is teaching at, and they had some heavyweight kirtaniyas visiting, Kish and company, and so they had a kirtan program at this yoga center. And how many people were there? 50, 60, 70? What do you think? I'm not good at estimating these things. Huh? No, there were way more than 30. Yeah, there was a good crowd. I mean, there were 10 just up on leading the kirtan. Think about that, you know. Anyway, there's probably 50 people there. And, you know, they introduced, and what's interesting about the yoga scene, like really reflecting on it, like the hippies were great because they were detached, but they had problems with intoxication and these kind of things. The yoga scene is really interesting because the people, if they're serious about it, they learn things that are more in line with Sattva-guna, with the mode of goodness, right? So they may not have some of the stumbling blocks that our generation were coming in with, like, you know, sex and drugs and rock and roll, all I need to kill my soul. They seem to be vibrating at somewhat of a higher level. And I'm seeing all over the movement and all over the world that kirtan is now introduced into these yoga sanghas, because yoga is pretty dry, you know what I mean? And they've caught on to kirtan, and the devotees, being followers of Srila Prabhupada and knowing this principle of yukta vairagya, they're latching on to these opportunities. And like all over the country and all over the world, there's a yoga center in the Bahamas. I used to work there once a year, not at the yoga center, but down the beach from them. And so I would go there and chant my japa in the morning. They have a beautiful deity of Krishna out there. And anyway, I noticed by getting to know them, it's a Shivananda yoga ashram, and they teach hatha yoga. And they're very sattvic people. They get up. Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah. Shivananda considered himself a devotee of Krishna, like that. And so, you know, there's a lot of interest. It's very muddled up with impersonal stuff, and he only wrote like one book, so they don't have much to work with. But anyway, tons of ISKCON devotees go there, like 6, 7, 8, 9 different ISKCON devotees go there throughout the year and do kirtans and even do some seminars and speaking and stuff, but especially kirtan, you know what I mean? They always have devotees come and do kirtan. And it's a big place. I mean, it's a retreat center. It's been there since the 1960s, and they have tons of people there, you know. So this is a very ripe demographic for sharing Krishna consciousness with, you know. And so I was just appreciating, you know, this wonderful opportunity that we have here in Miami, that Chandra Prabhu, such a nice devotee, he's teaching at this yoga center. He's very well connected with Govinda Priya. You've probably known him since he was born, right? And he has great respect for all the devotees, and he's a very, very nice devotee himself. So, you know, this is a great opportunity for the devotees. They're doing kirtan and they're inviting the devotees to participate. And the more that we can share Krishna consciousness in these types of venues, and everything we're doing here is so important because like attracts. So these people are cultivating the mode of goodness. And by doing our seva here, and by keeping the temple very clean and beautiful and the atmosphere sattvic, dressing the deities so beautifully, having such wonderful kirtan here in Prasadam, you know, gradually we can attract more and more and more people. When they come to the temple and they experience the super excellent atmosphere of Krishna consciousness, they'll become more and more attracted, right? So this is a great opportunity, is how I was feeling anyway from last night. And because it got me thinking about it, because this verse, it's a short purport, but Srila Prabhupada, the verse that he cites is related to the yoga ladder. Yam labhva chaparam labham manyate narikam tata. So this is from the Bhagavad Gita, from that, it's about 3 or 4 verses together. which is the 6th chapter of Dhyana Yoga. And Lord Krishna is explaining how to attain perfection through the yoga system, and what does that perfection look like for the practitioner. So Krishna says, in the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. So that particular line is the translation of the line that Prabhupada quotes in today's verse. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of the greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Right? So that was describing how King Bharata, having achieved the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he considered that the most exalted achievement in life. In other words, the devotees don't need to endeavor for any other opulence. Rather, they take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, and realizing their relationship with the Lord, they are fully satisfied and fully happy, right? And this is the reality. Of course, according to our stations in life, we have to engage in different kinds of activities. We have to be responsible. We have to work. Krishna says one cannot even maintain their material body without work. At the same time, we have to know that surrendering to Krishna, that Krishna is the only one who can provide us with our needs. Krishna is the only source of our abilities, right? Krishna says, I am the ability in man, right? So this process of surrendering to Krishna and having that faith that Krishna is my protector, Krishna is my mother, Krishna is my father, right? The other day we were singing beautiful bhajan, Nadiya Godrume Nityananda Mahajan. One of the verses says, we see Krishna as our mother, as our father, as our benefactor, right? So this is the process of devotional service. We're actually being trained to learn to have that full faith, This is one of the characteristics of surrender in devotional service, that we have that firm faith that Krishna is our protector, right? Very, very important. Suridam Sarvabhutanam. He is the heartfelt, the heart-dwelling, best bosom friend of every living entity. He knows better than we know what's best for us, and he wants us to attain it, right? We have so many ideas. Some of them are good, some of them are not. We have so many ideas, how I'll be happy, how I'll be successful, all these things. But Krishna, he takes the essence, right? Baba Grahi Janardana. He takes the essence of one's devotional inclination. Krishna knows that in the depths of our heart, once one surrenders to him, he knows that what we really want is Swacharan Amrita Seva. We want the service, the nectar of the service of his lotus feet. And although he sees all of our other desires which are interfering with that, there's that beautiful section, some purports, I think it's in the 5th canto, and Srila Prabhupada is quoting this conversation between the super soul and the jiva. And the super soul is saying, sometimes, the verses are saying, sometimes a devotee wants Krishna, but he also has so many other desires, right? And then the super soul says, "Hey, Murka, he is a fool. He wants me, but he's holding on to all this other stuff. Hey, Murka, he's a fool." But then Krishna says, "But I am not a fool. Therefore, I will smash all those desires. I will take everything away so that he will become totally dependent on my lotus feet. And then, Swa Charanamrita Seva, then I will give him the nectar of the service of my lotus feet." Right? So this is the mercy of the Lord. We are coming to Krishna consciousness, and we are endeavoring to become Krishna conscious. And by the mercy of the Vaishnavas, by the mercy of the Gurus, by the mercy of the previous Acharyas, by the mercy of the Lord, we are enabled to progress on this wonderful path of devotional service, right? And when we see that the Lord is frustrating our desires, sometimes the initial thing, some years ago, because I had a family to support, I've been a traveling salesman and I was away working, and I had a trip, and everything was going wrong. And my normal thing was I would work until Christmas, and then I would go to Mayapur where my family was living. But I did so bad on this trip that I didn't even make enough to go to India at the end of the day. And I was going through the whole, Krishna, why are you doing this? That thing that we sometimes go through, I'm trying to be your devotee, And it was really painful, But actually, when you look back, in retrospect, it was really, really good because it caused some internal deepening of, thinking about the situation, and from reading and studying and realizing that Lord Krishna always has our back, and he's looking at the very big picture. Sometimes we're looking right here. This is what I need today. This is what I need next week. But Krishna's looking at what we really need. You know what I mean? And so we have to have that faith that Krishna is always endeavoring for our best interest. Prabhupada said when he was a little boy, his father told him, Krishna has 10 hands. It's a perfect example, right? I think you're like 8, 9, 10 years old and your dad tells you, Krishna has 10 hands. When he wants to take from you, with your 2 hands, how much can you hold on to? I mean, just think about this. You have an apple and an orange in your hand, and some 10-handed guy comes up, With one hand, he grabs your right hand. With one hand, he grabs your left, grabs your leg, grabs your other leg. With his 5th hand, he grabs your orange. With his 6th hand, he grabs your apple. What are you going to hold on to? It's impossible, right? And then his father said, and when he wants to give you with his 10 hands, how much can you accept, right? And then Prabhupada joked once and he said, so later when I took sannyas, I was seeing Krishna coming with his 10 hands, and he was taking everything away. He was taking everything away, right? But then later when I came to your country and began this movement, and so many boys and girls came to me and began engaging in devotional service, then I saw now Krishna is coming with his 10 hands and he's giving more than I ever could have imagined, right? So this is practical. This is Srila Prabhupada's example. So we have to have that faith, that beautiful verse. And this is also, Prabhupada recognized this in his own life. Initially, when he had the order to spread Krishna consciousness all around the world through the media of the English language, he thought, I'm Grihasta, let me make good money and use that money to further Guru Maharaj's movement, to further his outreach. And he was endeavoring very sincerely in that way. But then gradually over the decades, he saw that even astrologically, he was supposed to become multi-gazillionaire, gradually he saw that one after the other, his endeavors were being frustrated in that way that he had envisioned it initially. And he even consulted with one of his godbrothers, Sridhar Maharaj actually. Prabhupada was in Calcutta, and he had a little apartment upstairs that he would let the sannyasis from Mayapur come stay and do their preaching, and he would take them around, and they would have preaching programs. So when Prabhupada was really noticing this as a pattern, he read that verse, Yasya Hamanugrinami, the famous Harisye Tadjaram Shanai, right? When I am especially mercifully inclined towards a devotee, I gradually take away everything so that they're brought to the position, and then their family and all their fair weather friends reject them. Oh, he's not providing, like that. And he comes to his knees and he realizes that there is no shelter but my lotus feet. And this is my special mercy. Sometimes it's said that if God likes you, he'll give you everything. And if he loves you, he'll take it all away. But that is his mercy. And I better end, right? We end the quarter up, right? So I'll end with this. There's a nice devotee in Alachua, a nice couple. Many of you probably know them, Nirmala and Devarshi Prabhu. Devarshi Prabhu became a devotee here in Miami. Mother Nirmala, very senior disciple of Prabhupada, was living here along with Rangavati, her sister, Chitari Prabhu. I think they were in Key West, but they were here in Miami. Anyway, she's a very nice devotee. We had the good fortune to live with her and Devarshi for a few years before we left Alachua. And she explained so nicely. She said, Krishna has to bring us, very often Krishna has to bring us to our knees so that we are calling out to him from our hearts. And often he does it through relationships, through health, and through finances. These are three areas that typically, at least those of us in the Grihastha ashram, we can be brought to our knees. But that position of being brought to our knees is wonderful, because that's where we really think about it. That's where we really cry. That's where we really call out to Krishna. And those so-called failures really become the pillars of success, right? So that we can actually appreciate the real opulence, the opulence of the opportunity to engage in loving devotional service to the Lord's. So, any comments or questions, corrections? Thank you. Oh, for me, I don't always get to be with devotees. I had to go back to work, and I'm a traveling salesman. So I find when I come to a temple, it's like such a blessing. And by all of your association, I feel more energy. Usually I can barely get out of bed, to tell you the truth. But like the association of the Vaishnavas in this Miami temple is so enlivening. I mean, this is such a transcendental oasis, inside and outside, in the grounds, in the temple room, and the wonderful, blissful, sweet, kind devotees, and the ecstatic prasadam. And what you Prabhus are doing here is so valuable. This temple. Somebody was telling me recently, and I can't remember who. I have a very bad memory, but they were telling me they were speaking with Radhanath Maharaj, and Radhanath Maharaj was encouraging them. He was saying, these like legacy temples in the big cities that Srila Prabhupada established in these big American cities, it's very, very important that we develop these temples and keep them strong and keep them growing, because these big cities, this is like what people really know about, and from these centers, it'll spread out all around them. So this work that you Prabhus are doing here, I mean, it's incalculable. I mean, you guys have been here for 50 some years serving the deities, right? Govinda was here, and now he's back, and always serving in between, but you're all here serving for varying lengths of time and developing this project and maintaining this project and sustaining this project. It's just so important, and this is really the source of life, and this is the source of energy, right? This is the source of enthusiasm, right? These wonderful temples that Srila Prabhupada has given us, right? Where would we be without this temple? It's incalculable. You don't even want to think about it. Like, where would we be without this process of Krishna consciousness, which is being maintained and offered here in Miami, right? So, anyway, thank you all. So great. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad-bhagavatam ki jai. Does this go in there too? Yes. I don't know how to do it. I'll get out of the way.
Nice class.